The Galactic Council chamber floated in the darkness between stars like a giant crystal ball that caught light from distant suns and turned it into rainbow colors across its walls. Inside the massive dome, representatives from 47 different alien species sat in their designated spots, each one different from the next in ways that would have amazed any human who saw them for the first time. But Kyle Morrison was not amazed anymore. He had been standing in this chamber for 3 years now, and all he felt was tired anger that burned in his chest like a slow fire that never went out. Kyle stood at the human podium with his hands gripped tight on the metal edges. His knuckles had turned white from the pressure, but he did not care. Behind him stood Claire Bennett, his assistant and the only other human in this entire structure. She was young and still believed that words could fix things, that if they just explained the situation one more time in one more way, these aliens would understand. Kyle knew better now. He had learned the hard way that some creatures only understood power, and humanity had been pretending they had more of it than they actually did. The Zathrene High Executor sat across from Kyle in a seat that looked like it was made from black glass and silver metal. The creature was taller than any human, with scales that shifted colors from blue to purple depending on its mood. Right now those scales were a calm blue, which made Kyle even angrier because it meant the Executor was not worried at all. The creature had just denied humanity's proposal for the 15th time, and it looked bored while doing it. The human proposal is denied, the Executor said through the translation device that turned its clicking sounds into words Kyle could understand. Your species will leave the disputed territories within 30 cycles. This is our final offer and the Council has voted to support it. Kyle felt Claire touch his arm gently, a warning to stay calm and professional. He ignored her. 30 cycles meant 30 of their months, which was not enough time to move millions of people from their homes. Not that it mattered anymore. The Zathrene had already made sure that many humans would never need to move again. Disputed territories, Kyle said, and his voice came out quieter than he intended, which somehow made it sound more dangerous. You keep using those words like they mean something. Let me tell you what I call them. I call them homes. I call them farms and schools and hospitals. I call them places where human children grew up under alien skies and thought they were building something good. He paused and looked directly at the Executor. I also call them mass graves now because your fleets burned them from orbit and killed 700,000 civilians. The chamber went silent. Some of the alien representatives shifted in their seats uncomfortably. The Velari delegate, a bird-like creature with feathers that glowed softly in the dim light, looked away from Kyle's eyes. The Korthan representative, something that looked like a floating jellyfish made of light and tissue, dimmed its colors slightly. Even the Mindari, who claimed to be humanity's friends and allies, seemed to find something fascinating about the floor suddenly. Not one species spoke up for humanity. Not one voice said that maybe, just maybe, burning entire worlds full of civilians was wrong. They had all voted, and they had all decided, that the Zathrene had the right to do what they did because of some ancient treaty that gave them claim to space that humans had settled 2 generations ago. The Executor made a sound that the translator turned into something like a sigh. The destruction of New Portland was a regrettable but necessary response to your illegal settlements. Your species was warned multiple times to vacate the region. You chose to ignore those warnings. Actions have consequences. Actions have consequences, Kyle repeated slowly, like he was testing how the words tasted. You're right about that. You're absolutely right. He reached up and touched the silver star pin on his collar, the one that marked him as Earth's official representative to the Galactic Council. It had been given to him 3 years ago in a ceremony full of hope and speeches about humanity joining the galactic community. He unpinned it carefully and held it up so everyone could see it catch the light. Then he dropped it on the crystal floor where it made a sharp ringing sound that echoed through the chamber like a bell. Humanity withdraws from these proceedings, Kyle said in a voice that carried to every corner of the dome. Effective immediately, we withdraw from the Galactic Council. We withdraw from the Treaty of Celestial Peace. We withdraw from the Convention on Warfare and all associated agreements. As of this moment, Earth and all human worlds are no longer bound by galactic law. The chamber exploded into noise. Dozens of aliens started talking at once in languages that the translators struggled to keep up with. The Executor rose from its seat to its full height, which put its head almost 3 meters above the floor. Its scales flushed from blue to bright red, which Kyle had learned meant extreme anger. You cannot simply abandon galactic law, the executor said, and now its voice had lost all traces of boredom. You will be declared rogue entities. The entire council will be authorized to take collective enforcement action against your species. Do you understand what that means? Kyle smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that showed teeth and promised violence. I understand perfectly. You're saying that you'll treat us like enemies. You'll hunt us and fight us and try to destroy us. He started walking toward the exit with Claire hurrying to keep up. Here's the thing, though. You were already doing that. You've been doing it for 3 years while pretending it was legal. So now we're just going to stop pretending. He reached the massive doors that led out of the chamber and paused with one hand on the frame. He looked back at the executor and all the other aliens who were staring at him like he had lost his mind. Maybe he had. Maybe 3 years of watching his people die while aliens debated the legal definition of genocide had broken something in him. But if it had, he was fine with that. Sometimes you had to break before you could become something stronger. Oh, an executor, Kyle said in a voice that sounded almost friendly. I'm authorized to deliver one more message before I leave. You have 48 hours to evacuate every single Zathrene citizen, soldier, and ship from human space. After that, we stop being responsible for what happens to anyone flying your flag. The executor's scales went from red to almost black, which meant rage beyond measure. You threaten us? You dare threaten the Zathrene Empire? We have 600 worlds under our control. We have fleets that have sailed between stars since before your ancestors learned to make fire. You have 93 worlds and ships that are barely a century old. You are children playing with weapons you do not understand. Kyle's smile got wider. You know what the problem with being ancient and powerful is? You forget that young and desperate is dangerous. You forget that humans spent thousands of years fighting each other before we ever reached the stars. We learned how to wage war on a planet where everything was trying to kill us, and we became the best at it. He pulled the door open. You've never fought anyone who fought back with everything they had. You've never fought a species that learned warfare before they learned mercy. You're about to get an education. This is insanity, the Vehlari delegate called out. You'll be destroyed. Maybe, Kyle agreed. But we'll take a lot of you with us. And maybe that'll teach the rest of the galaxy a lesson about what happens when you stand by and watch innocent people burn. He looked around the chamber one last time. You could have helped us. You could have stood up and said that what the Zathrene did was wrong. But you didn't. You hid behind your laws and your votes and your comfortable neutrality. So now you get to watch what happens when you push humanity into a corner. Claire was pulling at his arm now, trying to get him to leave before he said something that could not be taken back. But Kyle was not done yet. He had one more thing to say. One more message to deliver to these creatures who thought they ruled the galaxy. We tried to be good galactic citizens, Kyle said quietly. We followed your rules and respected your territories and asked politely for justice. And you taught us that none of that matters. You taught us that the only thing the galaxy respects is strength, so thank you for the lesson. We're going to apply it really well. The doors closed behind them with a solid thump that sounded like a book closing or a coffin lid shutting. Kyle walked down the corridor with Claire beside him, and he could hear her breathing fast like she had just run a race. His own heart was pounding, but his hands were steady now. The anger that had been burning in his chest for 3 years had turned into something colder and harder. Something that felt like certainty. Sir, Claire said, and her voice shook a little. What did we just do? Kyle stopped walking and turned to look at her. She was young and scared and probably thinking about everything that was going to happen. Now that humanity had declared itself outside galactic law, he felt bad for her because she was going to have to watch the war that was coming, the war that was already here, really. Just waiting to be acknowledged. We stopped begging, Kyle said. We stopped asking permission to defend ourselves. We stopped being victims. He started walking again, heading toward the docking bay where their ship waited. No. We're going to show them what humans are really like when you take away all the rules. Behind them, the council chamber erupted in arguments and threats and warnings. But Kyle did not look back. He was done with diplomacy and done with hope that words would fix anything. Earth had sent him here to find peace, and instead he had found the truth about how the galaxy really worked. Now he was going home to tell his people that truth. And then they were going to do what humans had always done when someone pushed them too far. They were going to push back. Admiral Jacob Hayes stood in the war room deep beneath the surface of Earth, surrounded by screens that showed the positions of every human ship and station. scattered across 93 worlds. The room was cold because of all the computers that lined the walls, and the air smelled like metal and electricity. Around the large holographic table in the center stood the leaders of humanity's military forces, and every single one of them looked like they had not slept in days. Jacob knew he looked the same way because he had not slept either. Not since the message came through from Ambassador Morrison 6 hours ago. General Linda Martinez broke the silence first. She was a short woman with gray hair cut, military short, and eyes that had seen too many wars on Earth before humanity ever reached space. "They actually did it," she said, and her voice mixed disbelief with something that might have been pride. Morrison walked out of the council and told the Zathrene to get out of our space or else. "He did more than that," Jacob said, pulling up the full transmission on the holographic display. The message from Morrison played again, his voice calm and cold as he told the council that humanity was done playing by their rules. "He's given us authorization to respond to Zathrene aggression with extreme prejudice. No more rules of engagement. No more proportional response doctrine. No more fighting with both hands tied behind our backs and one foot in a bucket." The room went quiet enough that Jacob could hear the hum of the air recyclers and the distant sound of boots on metal floors somewhere in the levels above them. Everyone was processing what that meant. What Morrison had just given them permission to do after 3 years of fighting a war they were not allowed to actually fight. Colonel Derek Sullivan leaned forward with his big hands flat on the table. He commanded the Terran Marine Corps, the ground troops who had been watching alien fleets burn colonies from orbit and not being allowed to strike back at the ships doing it. "Are you saying what I think you're saying, Admiral?" "I'm saying we're done playing defense," Jacob answered. "For 3 years we've fought this war the way the Council demanded. We've protected our territory and nothing else. We've honored treaties about neutral zones and civilian protection that the enemy ignored completely. We've surrendered ground because the Council said we had to negotiate." He looked around at each face in the room. "That ends right now, today, this minute." Commander Nicole Perry brought up a star chart that showed Zathrene territory in red and human space in blue. She ran the Naval Intelligence Division and knew more about enemy fleet positions than anyone else alive. The Zathrene have 19 major military bases within 3 jump points of human space. Every single one is protected by Council neutrality agreements that say we can't touch them. "We're not part of the Council anymore," Jacob said. "Those agreements don't apply to us. Nicole, I want strike plans for every one of those bases. I want them hit simultaneously. Maximum damage, 0 warning given." "Sir," Captain Ryan Foster interrupted. He was young for his rank, promoted fast because he was smart, and because humanity needed smart officers in a hurry. "The rest of the Council will respond. We'll end up fighting everyone, not just the Zathrene." "No, we won't," Nicole said before Jacob could answer. She highlighted different sections of the galaxy on her display. "We've been running intelligence operations on every Council species for years. The Veleri are dealing with 3 separate rebellion movements in their outer colonies. The Korthan just lost an entire fleet to some kind of biological weapon. Probably the Rimward plague we've been hearing about. The Mindari talk about being our allies, but they don't even have the military strength to defend their own borders." She looked up from her display. "The Zathrene are counting on Council support that isn't going to come. Most of these species are too busy with their own problems. And once they see what we do to the Zathrene, they're going to think real hard before they decide to make an enemy of humanity." General Martinez pulled up production reports from the shipyards orbiting Earth and Mars and the big construction facilities at Jupiter. "Our industrial base has been running at maximum capacity for 2 years. We have 300 warships ready for combat right now, with another 100 in final construction stages. The Zathrene think we're a minor military power because we're young. They think we fight like the other Council species, all ceremony and honor and predictable tactics." She smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "They have no idea what's about to hit them." "What about our civilians?" Derek asked, and his voice was serious because he had friends and family on the border colonies. "The outer worlds are exposed. If the Zathrene decide to hit back at our population centers instead of military targets, we could lose millions." "We evacuate everyone from the border systems," Jacob said. He had already thought about this part, had been thinking about it for hours while waiting for Morrison's message. "Emergency protocols go into effect immediately. Anyone who wants to leave gets transportation off-world within 72 hours. Anyone who wants to stay can stay, but they do it armed and with bunkers to hide in and full knowledge that they might die. A lot of people will stay, Linda said quietly. You know how colonists are. They built those worlds with their own hands. They're not going to run just because someone threatens them. I know, Jacob agreed, and we'll defend them as best we can. But I won't lie to people and tell them it's safe. They deserve the truth. He looked around the room again. Humanity survived ice ages back on Earth. We survived plagues that killed half our population. We survived world wars fought with atomic weapons. We're survivors. It's what we do best. And now we're going to remind the galaxy what that means. Nicole brought up another display, this one showing Zathreen fleet movements over the past 6 months. I've been analyzing their tactical patterns. They're arrogant. They keep their formations predictable because they've never lost a battle. Their supply lines are exposed because no one has ever been crazy enough to attack them. They fight like they're performing in a show, all about honor and tradition and making sure everyone knows how powerful they are. She highlighted several weak points. They've never fought an enemy that hits back hard. They've never faced someone willing to ignore the rules and go for the throat. Then let's educate them, Jacob said. I want strike teams ready to move in 12 hours. I want every captain briefed on the new rules of engagement, which are that there are no rules anymore. If it's Zathreen military, it's a target. If it's a Zathreen supply ship, it's a target. If it's a Zathreen communications relay, it's a target. He paused. We're not targeting civilians. We're not becoming them. But everything else is fair game. They're going to scream about war crimes, Ryan warned. They're going to call us barbarians and monsters. Let them, Linda said. They glassed New Portland and killed 700,000 civilians, and the council called it a regrettable but necessary action. They don't get to lecture us about morality. Derek pulled up a list of Zathreen installations. If we're going to do this, we should hit them where it hurts most. Take out their shipyards. Destroy their fuel depots. Cut their supply lines and strand their fleets far from home. He smiled grimly. Make them feel what it's like to be helpless. Exactly, Jacob agreed. We're not just fighting a war. We're sending a message to every species in the galaxy. The message is simple. Don't mess with humanity. Don't burn our worlds. Don't kill our people. Because if you do, we will come for you with everything we have and we won't stop until you beg us to. Nicole was working on her display, running calculations and tactical projections. If we hit all 19 bases simultaneously, we'll need to split our fleet. That means smaller strike groups, which increases risk. Risk is acceptable, Jacob said. The element of surprise is worth it. The Zathreen won't be expecting this. They think we're going to keep fighting defensively. They think we're too scared of the council to really commit. He smiled coldly. They're about to learn how wrong they are. How long do we keep this up? Ryan asked. Do we stop when they surrender? Do we stop when they're completely destroyed? What's the endgame here? Jacob was quiet for a moment, thinking about that question. It was a good question, the kind that separated soldiers from murderers. We stop when they can't threaten us anymore. We stop when every other species in the galaxy understands that humanity is not prey. We stop when we've made it clear that attacking us costs more than anyone is willing to pay. He looked at Ryan directly. We're not trying to conquer them. We're not trying to commit genocide. We're trying to make sure this never happens again. Shock and awe, Linda said softly. Hit them so hard and so fast that they can't recover. Make the cost of fighting us so high that surrender is the only logical option. Exactly, Jacob confirmed. And we do it before the council can organize a response. We do it before other species decide to help the Zathreen. We move fast, we hit hard, and we make them regret ever hearing the word human. The officers around the table started moving, pulling up tactical displays and calling in their subordinates and beginning the enormous task of coordinating an attack across multiple star systems. Jacob watched them work and felt something shift in his chest, something that had been tight with frustration for 3 years suddenly loosening. They were finally going to fight back. They were finally going to show these aliens that humanity was not some helpless species to be pushed around. Nicole came up beside him as the others worked. This is going to change everything, she said quietly. After this, we can't go back to how things were. I know, Jacob said, but things were broken anyway. The council was broken. The whole system was designed to protect the strong and control the weak. He looked at her. Maybe we're not meant to fit into their system. Maybe humanity needs to make our own path. That's going to make us a lot of enemies, Nicole warned. We already have enemies, Jacob pointed out. At least now we're not pretending they're friends. He turned back to the holographic display showing human space and all the threats surrounding it. Send the orders. Begin evacuation of the border colonies. Activate all reserves, and get our strike teams ready to jump. Yes, sir, Nicole said, and there was something in her voice that sounded like relief, like she had been waiting 3 years to hear those words. Jacob stood alone in the center of the war room and looked at the stars displayed around him. Somewhere out there, the Zathreen were celebrating their victory in the council, thinking they had beaten humanity into submission. They had no idea what was coming. In 12 hours they would learn. In 12 hours, humanity would stop asking for permission and start taking what they needed to survive. In 12 hours, the galaxy would understand that humans were done being victims. Captain Alan Brooks sat in the command chair of the Earth, Defense Ship Retribution, and watched the countdown. Timer ticked toward 0 on his main display. Around his ship, 19 other human destroyers held perfect formation in the darkness between stars, all of them hidden from sensors by running completely silent, with only minimal life support active. The crew had been sitting in this cold, dark place for 6 hours, waiting for the exact moment when all 20 strike groups across the galaxy would emerge from jump space and attack simultaneously. Alan could see his breath in the air because they had turned off most of the heating to reduce their energy signature. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Melissa Carter, sat at her station with her hands ready over the controls, and he could see she was breathing fast even though she was trying to stay calm. 2 minutes to jump, Melissa said quietly, like speaking too loud might give away their position even though there was nobody around to hear them for several light years in any direction. Status of all ships, Alan ordered, and his voice sounded steady even though his heart was hammering in his chest. This was it. This was the moment when humanity stopped playing defense and started hitting back with everything they had. All ships report ready, Melissa confirmed. Weapons charged, jump drives spooled, crews at battle stations. We're good to go, Captain. Alan nodded and pulled up the tactical display of their target. The Zathreen military station called Karvesh hung in orbit around a gas giant named Therex, a massive complex of docking bays and weapons platforms and command centers that housed 12,000 Zathreen personnel. The station serviced the Zathreen Third Fleet, providing fuel and ammunition and repairs for over 50 warships. It had been there for 300 years without ever being threatened, and the Zathreen who worked there probably thought they were completely safe. They had less than 2 minutes left to think that. Captain, Lieutenant Paul Henderson called from the communications station. Admiral Hayes is on the command network. He wants to address all strike group commanders before we jump. Put him through, Alan said, and Jacob Hayes's face appeared on a small screen beside his chair. The Admiral looked tired but determined, and behind him Alan could see the war room back on Earth with its displays showing all 20 strike groups positioned at their jump points. Captains, Jacob said without any preamble or fancy speech. In 90 seconds we jump into Zathreen space and we hit them hard. Some of you might be thinking about the rules we learned in the academy, about proportional response and minimizing casualties and following the conventions of civilized warfare. He paused. Forget all of that. The Zathreen burned our worlds and killed our people, and the galactic community did nothing. We're done asking permission. You have authorization to destroy every military target you encounter. No warnings, no mercy, no hesitation. Make them understand what it means to start a war with humanity. The transmission ended and Alan looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all young, most of them barely 30 years old, trained for a war that everyone hoped would never happen. Now it was happening and they were about to find out if all that training was worth anything. 30 seconds, Melissa announced. Alan keyed the ship-wide intercom. All hands, this is the captain. We've spent 3 years watching the Zathreen kill our people. We've followed orders to stay defensive, to protect but not attack, to be the bigger species and not sink to their level. He took a breath. Today that ends. Today we show them what humans are capable of when you push us too far. Stay sharp, follow your training, and remember that we're fighting for every human who died while the galaxy looked away. Let's make this count. 10 seconds, Melissa said, and her voice was steadier now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, jump. The universe twisted around them in a way that Alan's brain could never quite process no matter how many times he experienced it. Colors that should not exist flashed across the view screens and his stomach tried to turn inside out. and then suddenly they were somewhere else. Emerging from jump space in perfect attack formation around the Zathreen station Karvesh. Multiple contacts, Melissa called out immediately, her fingers flying across her controls. Zathreen frigates, defensive platforms, station weapons systems coming online. They're hailing us on all frequencies. They want to know who we are and what we're doing here. Ignore all hails, Alan ordered. All ships weapons free. Execute attack plan Delta. 20 human destroyers opened fire at the same moment, and the space around Karvesh turned into a storm of energy and metal. The Zathreen had spent 3 years fighting humanity, but they had been fighting humans who followed rules, who announced their attacks, who tried to minimize damage. They had never faced human warships that came out of nowhere with weapons already hot, and no intention of talking first. The defensive platforms died in the first 5 seconds. Human railguns fired slugs of tungsten carbide accelerated to a fraction of light speed, and those slugs tore through Zathreen shields like they were not even there. The platforms exploded in balls of fire that looked almost beautiful against the dark of space and the swirling colors of the gas giant below. The Zathreen frigates tried to maneuver into defensive positions, but human missiles were already swarming toward them. These were not the simple explosive warheads that most species used. Human missiles carried thousands of tiny ball bearings that spread out in a cloud and shredded hulls and punctured fuel tanks and vented atmosphere into space. 3 frigates died before they could even return fire. Station shields are holding, Melissa reported. They're stronger than we expected. Concentrate all fire on the shield generators, Alan ordered. I want those shields down now. The Retribution's main railgun spoke with a sound that Alan felt through his entire body, a deep vibration that made his teeth ache. The slug hit the station's primary shield generator dead center, and the entire structure flickered. 2 more destroyers fired at the same spot, and the shields collapsed completely. Shields down, Melissa confirmed. Station is defenseless. Target their reactor cores, Alan said, and he was surprised at how calm his voice sounded. I want nothing left but debris and wreckage. The Retribution's main energy cannon charged for 3 seconds and then fired a lance of coherent light that cut through the station like a knife through paper. The beam hit the central reactor complex, and for a moment nothing happened. Then secondary explosions rippled outward as fusion reactors lost containment and tore themselves apart. The station that had stood for 300 years came apart in less than a minute, breaking into pieces that would burn up in the gas giant's atmosphere over the next few days. Captain, Paul called from communications. I'm picking up jump signatures. Zathreen reinforcements are arriving. How many? Alan asked. At least 20 contacts, maybe more. It looks like elements of the 3rd Fleet that were out on patrol. Good, Alan said, and he meant it. Let them come. All ships break formation and engage at will. Show them what happens when they try to fight us. The Zathreen 3rd Fleet had never lost a battle in its 200-year history. It was used to enemies that fought with honor, that announced their intentions, that followed the established rules of warfare. The fleet commanders probably thought this would be just another easy victory against the young human species that barely knew how to fight in space. They were wrong about everything. Human destroyers did not fight in neat formations. They did not announce their attacks. They did not engage in single combat like the honor codes demanded. Instead, they swarmed like wolves, 3 or 4 ships attacking a single Zathreen vessel from different angles while using electronic warfare to jam sensors and communications. They fired from ranges that should have been impossible, and maneuvered in ways that ignored conventional tactics completely. A Zathreen cruiser tried to bring its main guns to bear on the Retribution, but Melissa had already calculated its firing. Arc and move the ship out of the way before the alien could even pull the trigger. 2 human destroyers came in from below and raked the cruiser's hull with railgun fire that penetrated deep into its interior. The ship did not explode dramatically. It just stopped moving as its reactor shut down and its crew died from sudden decompression. Captain, the enemy is trying to form a defensive perimeter, Melissa reported. They're attempting to protect their command ship. Identify the command ship and transmit coordinates to all vessels, Alan ordered. Everyone focus fire on that target. Take out their leadership and they'll fall apart. The Zathreen command ship was massive, 3 times the size of a human destroyer and bristling with weapons. Its shields were powerful enough to absorb the first dozen hits without failing. But human ships kept firing, kept circling, kept hitting the same spots over and over until the shields flickered and died. Then the railguns and missiles and energy weapons all found their mark at once. The command ship broke in half. Alan watched it happen on his view screen, watched thousands of Zathreen crew members die in an instant, and he felt nothing. Maybe that made him a monster. Maybe 3 years of watching aliens burn human colonies had burned away the part of him that cared about enemy casualties. He did not know, and right now he did not care. Enemy fleet is breaking off, Paul announced. The surviving ships are jumping away. Let them go, Alan said. They'll spread the word about what happened here. That's exactly what we want. The battle was over. Alan looked at the tactical display and counted the cost. 17 Zathreen warships destroyed. The station reduced to floating wreckage, maybe 20,000 enemy personnel dead. On the human side, 2 destroyers had taken damage, but none were destroyed and casualties were minimal. Melissa, compile a full battle report, Alan ordered. Paul, send a message to all ships. Well done. Objective achieved. Prepare to jump out in 5 minutes. Sir, Melissa said quietly, are we really doing this? Are we really going to keep attacking until the Zathreen surrender? Alan looked at her and saw doubt in her eyes, saw the same question he had been asking himself. They had just killed thousands of beings who might have had families and dreams and lives they cared about. But then he remembered the images from New Portland, remembered the burned cities and the bodies and the children who died because the Zathreen decided human lives did not matter. Yes, he said firmly, we're doing this. Because if we don't, they'll just do it again to someone else. We're teaching them a lesson they should have learned a long time ago. Some species are not prey. Some species fight back. The Retribution and her sister ships jumped away into the darkness, leaving behind only wreckage and the beginning of a legend that would spread across the galaxy. The legend of what happened when humanity stopped asking permission and started demanding respect. 20 simultaneous attacks across Zathreen space. 20 military installations destroyed. Over 100 enemy warships reduced to debris. And humanity had only just begun. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called 72 hours after the human attacks began, and the chamber that had always been a place of calm deliberation now felt like a cage full of frightened animals. The Velari ambassador's feathers were puffed up so much that she looked twice her normal size, which meant extreme agitation in her species. The Corthan delegate floated in its containment sphere with colors flashing red and orange, cycling through emotions too fast for its biology to settle on just one. Even the Mindari representative, usually a calm presence of pure energy, was pulsing erratically like a broken light. The Zathreen High Executor stood at the center of the chamber, and for the first time since Kyle Morrison had seen it, the creature looked old and tired. Its scales were a dull gray color that meant exhaustion or defeat, and it moved slowly like every movement hurt. Behind it on the main display were images of destroyed stations and burning ships and casualty reports that kept climbing higher every hour. 19 military installations destroyed, the executor said, and its voice came through the translator sounding hollow and empty. Over 100 warships lost. Estimated casualties exceed 30,000 personnel. It turned slowly to look around the chamber. The humans attacked simultaneously across 17 star systems. They gave no warning. They took no prisoners. They destroyed everything they encountered and then vanished back into jump space before reinforcements could arrive. The Velari ambassador made a sound like a bird screeching. This is unprecedented. This is barbaric. They have violated every principle of civilized warfare. The Council must take immediate action. What action do you suggest? The Corthan delegate asked, and its voice through the translator sounded genuinely curious rather than angry. The humans are no longer bound by council law. They withdrew from all treaties. Technically, they have not violated any agreements because they are not party to any agreements. They have committed acts of war against a council member species, the Velari insisted. That alone justifies collective action. We should authorize a combined fleet to enforce peace. Peace, the Mindari representative said, and its voice was bitter in a way that energy beings rarely managed. Where was this concern for peace when the Zathreen were burning human colonies? Where was the collective action when New Portland died? I seem to recall the council voting that the Zathreen response was legal and proportionate. The chamber erupted into arguments, dozens of species all talking at once in languages that made the translation system struggle to keep up. The noise was deafening until a clear human voice cut through it all. You're right to be scared. Everyone turned to see Kyle Morrison walking into the chamber. He was not wearing diplomatic credentials anymore, just simple civilian clothes that looked out of place in the ornate council hall. But he walked like he owned the place, calm and confident and completely unbothered by the hundreds of alien eyes watching him. "You have no standing in this chamber," the executor said, but its voice lacked conviction. "You withdrew from the council. You have no right to address this body." "I know," Kyle agreed pleasantly, stopping in the center of the floor where he had dropped his ambassador pin just days before. "I'm not here as a diplomat. I'm here as a courtesy, to explain what's about to happen next. Consider it a public service announcement. You dare come here after what your species has done?" the Valari ambassador demanded. "You have murdered thousands. You have destroyed council-protected installations. You have violated every law of civilized society." Kyle looked at her with eyes that showed no emotion at all. "You mean we did to them what they did to us?" "Yes, that's exactly what we did, and we're going to keep doing it until they can't do it to anyone else ever again." The executor's scales flushed with color for the first time, shifting from gray to a sickly yellow that meant fear mixed with rage. "You cannot fight the entire Zathrene Empire. We have 600 worlds. We have been a spacefaring civilization for over 3,000 years. You are children playing with weapons you barely understand, are we?" Kyle pulled up a holographic display that showed Zathrene space with red markers, indicating destroyed or damaged installations. "In the last 72 hours, we've eliminated 40% of your offensive military capacity. We've blockaded your 3 largest shipyard systems so nothing gets in or out. We've destroyed your main fuel depot at Thresh, which means your fleets are going to start running out of gas real soon. We've captured your supply convoy at the Corvin Junction, which means your people are about to start going hungry." He smiled, "And we're just getting started." The chamber went silent. Even the species that had been arguing stopped to stare at the display showing the extent of human military action. It was more comprehensive than anyone had realized, more devastating than anyone had imagined possible. "What do you want?" the Corthan delegate asked quietly. "What will it take for humanity to stop this campaign?" "Nothing from you," Kyle said, and his tone made it clear he was not interested in negotiating. "This is between humanity and the Zathrene. I'm here to deliver a message to everyone else. Stay out of our way. Don't interfere. Don't send aid to the Zathrene. Don't try to mediate or negotiate or find a diplomatic solution." He looked around the chamber. "Anyone who helps them becomes our enemy. Anyone who gets between us and them gets hurt. It's that simple." "That is a threat against the entire Galactic Council," the Vehlari protested. "You cannot dictate terms to us. We are the legitimate governing body of civilized space. You're a group of species that stood by and watched genocide happen because stopping it was inconvenient," Kyle corrected. "You voted that burning an entire world full of civilians was legal. You decided that human lives were worth less than ancient territorial claims." His voice got harder. "So no, I'm not threatening you. I'm informing you. This is happening. You can stay out of it and be safe, or you can get involved and learn what happened to the Zathrene. Your choice." The Mindari representative pulsed with what looked like approval. Some of us argued for intervention on humanity's behalf. Some of us said the Zathrene had gone too far, but we were outvoted. The council chose neutrality over justice. "Neutrality?" Kyle repeated the word like it tasted bad. "You know what neutrality means? It means you decided that maintaining good relations with the Zathrene was more important than stopping mass murder. It means you valued stability over doing what was right." He looked directly at the Mindari. "And now you get to watch what happens when you push a species into a corner and force them to save themselves." A new delegate spoke up, representing a species called the Thriss that Kyle had never dealt with before. "What is humanity's endgame? Do you intend to conquer Zathrene space? To commit genocide in return for genocide?" "No," Kyle said firmly. "We're not conquerors and we're not murderers. We're defenders who got tired of asking permission to defend ourselves. Our goal is simple. Make the cost of fighting humanity so high that no one ever tries it again. Show the galaxy that we're not prey. Prove that young and desperate beats old and arrogant every single time." "You will be destroyed," the executor said, but it sounded like the creature was trying to convince itself rather than Kyle. "Eventually your ships will break down. Your ammunition will run out. Your people will grow tired of war. We can outlast you." Kyle laughed, and it was a sound without humor. "You really don't understand humans at all, do you? We spent 10,000 years fighting each other on one planet. We perfected warfare while you were learning to sail between stars peacefully. We know how to hate, how to sacrifice, how to keep fighting long after any sane species would have given up. He moved closer to the executor. You think you can outlast us? We held grudges for centuries back on Earth. We fought wars that lasted generations over insults to our ancestors. You started this fight 3 years ago. We're just getting warmed up. The executor seemed to shrink back, and Kyle realized the creature was actually afraid. Good. It should be afraid. Every species in this chamber should be afraid, because they were finally seeing what humanity really was under all the diplomatic niceties and peaceful intentions. The Council will remember this day, the Velari ambassador said coldly. Humanity has revealed itself to be a violent and unstable species. When this war is over, assuming your species survives, you will find yourselves isolated and alone in the galaxy. We're already alone, Kyle pointed out. You made sure of that when you refused to help us. The difference is now we're alone and dangerous instead of alone and vulnerable. He started walking toward the exit. You want to isolate us? Go ahead. We'll build our own alliances with species that understand that friendship means something. We'll create our own coalition based on actual mutual defense instead of empty promises and procedural votes. You're destroying the galactic order, the Corthan observed, the system that has maintained relative peace for thousands of years. Kyle stopped at the doorway and looked back. Your galactic order let 700,000 humans burn to death while you debated legal definitions. Your peace was built on letting the strong do whatever they wanted as long as they filed the right paperwork first. He shook his head. Maybe that system needs to be destroyed. Maybe the galaxy needs a new order. One where strength comes with responsibility and treaties actually mean something. And humanity will build this new order? The executor asked with what might have been sarcasm. Maybe, Kyle said. Or maybe we'll just break the old one and let someone else figure out what comes next. Either way, we're done being victims in your system. He looked around the chamber one more time. You could have had our friendship. We came to you with open hands and honest intentions. We believed in your counsel and your laws and your promises of justice. His expression hardened. Instead, you taught us that the only thing the galaxy respects is power. So thank you for that lesson. We're very good students. The doors closed behind him, and Kyle walked down the corridor with his footsteps echoing on the crystal floor. Behind him, he could hear the council erupting into arguments again. Species blaming each other for the situation and trying to figure out what to do about the human problem. He did not care what they decided. Humanity was past the point of caring what the council thought or said or voted on. In his pocket, Kyle's communication device buzzed with a message from Admiral Hayes. The Zathrene had requested a meeting to discuss terms. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted the attacks to stop. They were ready to talk about ending the war. Kyle smiled. It had taken 3 years and 30,000 enemy casualties, and the destruction of half their military infrastructure. But finally the Zathrene were ready to listen. Finally they understood that humanity was not some weak species to be pushed around and dismissed. Finally they were learning the lesson that the galaxy needed to learn. Never corner a predator unless you're ready for it to fight back with everything it has. Kyle sent a one-word reply to Hayes. Proceed. Then he headed for the docking bay where his ship waited to take him home to Earth. He had been away for 3 years, living in this crystalline palace and trying to make peace with species that did not want peace. Now he was going home to a planet that had rediscovered what it meant to be human. He could not wait to see it again. 6 months had passed since Ambassador Kyle Morrison walked out of the Galactic Council chamber, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Zathrene High Executor arrived at the human colony world of New Harmony alone, not with a fleet, but with a single diplomatic ship flying a white flag that was recognized across 100 species as a symbol of surrender. Admiral Jacob Hayes watched the ship land from the window of a prefabricated building on the edge of the colony's main settlement, and he felt nothing except a cold satisfaction that justice was finally being served. The building was simple and functional, nothing like the Grand Council chamber where humanity used to beg for help. There were no crystals or holographic displays or seats designed for dozens of different body types, just a plain metal table and 2 chairs and walls that still smelled like fresh paint. Jacob had chosen this place deliberately because he wanted the executor to understand that humanity was done playing by alien rules. If the Zathrene wanted to talk, they would do it in a human space on human terms. The executor entered the room moving slowly, like every step caused pain. Its scales had turned from the confident blue Jacob remembered to a dull gray that meant exhaustion and defeat. The creature that had once dismissed humanity as insignificant children now looked old and broken, and Jacob found he did not feel any pity for it at all. "You wanted peace talks," Jacob said without offering any greeting or courtesy. "So talk." The executor settled into the chair across from him with movements that were careful and precise, like it was worried about making any sudden gestures. "The Zathrene Council of Elders has authorized me to negotiate a complete cessation of hostilities. We acknowledge human territorial claims to all disputed systems. We will pay reparations for the destruction of New Portland and the other colonies that were damaged. We will withdraw all military forces from within 10 jumps of human space." It paused and looked at Jacob with eyes that were nothing like human eyes, but somehow still managed to show desperation. "And we request mercy for our remaining population and infrastructure." Jacob leaned back in his chair and studied the alien that had once threatened to destroy humanity. "And what else?" "And we formally apologize," the executor said. And Jacob could hear how much it hurt the creature's pride to say those words. "The attack on New Portland was unjustified. The Council's decision to authorize military action against civilian populations was wrong. We acknowledge that our species initiated this conflict through aggression, and we accept full responsibility for the consequences." "You missed something," Jacob said quietly. The executor's scales shifted to show confusion. "I have offered everything that our elders authorized me to offer. Full territorial concessions, reparations, withdrawal, apology. What more can we give?" "You can beg," Jacob said, and his voice was hard as steel. "You glassed an entire world. You killed 700,000 civilians who never hurt anyone, who were just trying to build farms and raise families on a planet far from Earth. You came to the Council and told them it was legal and necessary and justified. So now you can beg for mercy and maybe I'll consider giving it to you." The chamber went silent. Jacob could hear air recyclers humming and somewhere outside the sound of construction as colonists rebuilt what the war had damaged. The executor sat very still, and Jacob knew the creature was struggling with pride and necessity, with the shame of begging versus the survival of its species. "Please," the executor finally said, and its voice was barely above a whisper. "Please stop the attacks. We have lost half our military fleet. Our economy is collapsing. Our shipyards are destroyed. Our supply lines are cut. Our people are starving on worlds that used to be prosperous." It looked up at Jacob. "You have proven your point. You have shown the galaxy that humanity cannot be threatened. Please, we beg you, no more destruction." Jacob let the silence stretch out for a long moment, let the executor sit with its shame and fear. Part of him wanted to say no, wanted to keep hitting the Zathrene until they were completely broken, until every last one of them understood what it felt like to watch their worlds burn. But he was not here to commit genocide. He was here to make sure this never happened again. "Here are humanity's terms," Jacob said finally. "Complete Zathrene withdrawal from all disputed territories within 60 days. Reparations equal to 3 times the cost of rebuilding New Portland and every other damaged colony. A formal apology broadcast on every council channel and every news network in Zathrene space. And a permanent human military base at the border between our territories to make sure you never forget what happens when you threaten us." "Agreed," the executor said immediately, with no hesitation or negotiation. "All terms are acceptable." "I'm not finished," Jacob continued. "Humanity is formally withdrawing from the Galactic Council permanently. We're done participating in a system that let genocide become a policy debate. We'll maintain diplomatic relations with individual species, but we will never again accept council authority over human affairs." The executor nodded slowly. "The council has already discussed this possibility. Many species believe the council will be weaker without human participation." "The council was already weak," Jacob pointed out. "That's why we're leaving. But we're not going to isolate ourselves completely. We're establishing something new, something we're calling the Terran Defense Coalition. Any species that wants real mutual defense, that's willing to actually stand with their allies instead of voting on whether to help them, can join us. We're offering genuine protection based on genuine commitment, an alliance outside council authority," the executor said. "That will change the balance of power in this entire sector of the galaxy." "It already has," Jacob said. "The Velari have asked to join. So have the Thriss and the Manthari and half a dozen smaller species that are tired of being pushed around by the big empires. We are not interested in conquest or building an empire of our own, but we're also never going to be victims again, and we're going to make sure our allies don't become victims either. The executor was quiet for a moment, processing this information. You have fundamentally altered galactic politics. The old system of council mediation and neutral enforcement is breaking down. Species are choosing sides. This could lead to instability and conflict. The old system already led to instability and conflict, Jacob corrected. It just hid it behind diplomatic language and procedural votes. Now at least everyone knows where they stand. You're either with us or you're against us, or you stay neutral and we leave you alone. It's simpler and more honest than what the council was doing. And if species choose to oppose you? The executor asked. Jacob smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Then they learn the same lesson you learned. Humanity tried peace first. We wanted to be good galactic citizens. We followed the rules and respected the treaties and asked politely for justice. You taught us that none of that matters unless you have the strength to back it up. He leaned forward. So thank you for the education. We'll make sure to apply it to anyone else who needs to learn it. The executor rose slowly from its chair. I will convey your terms to the Council of Elders. They will be accepted without modification. The formal apology will be broadcast within 24 hours. Withdrawal of our forces will begin immediately. Good, Jacob said. And executor, one more thing. Make sure your people understand why this happened. Make sure they know that you could have had our friendship, but you chose to make us your enemy instead. Make sure every Zathrene child learns the story of what happened when your species thought humans were weak. They will learn, the executor promised. This war will be taught in our schools for generations. The humans who seemed harmless became the most dangerous enemy we ever faced. The species we dismissed became the species that brought our empire to its knees. It moved toward the door, then paused. May I ask you something, Admiral? Go ahead, Jacob allowed. What would you have done if the Council had supported humanity 3 years ago? If we had been stopped before New Portland burned? If the galaxy had stood with you instead of against you? Jacob was quiet for a long time, thinking about that question. He looked out the window at New Harmony, at the colonists working to rebuild and restart their lives. These were people who had named their world after hope and peace, who had believed that the galaxy was a place where different species could live together in harmony. We would have remained the species that believed in diplomacy and cooperation, Jacob said finally. We would have stayed the optimistic newcomers who thought civilization meant something more than just organized violence. We would have been your friends and allies, and we would have helped build a better galaxy together. He looked back at the executor. You could have had the best of humanity. Instead, you forced out the worst of us. I hope it was worth it. The executor left without another word, and Jacob watched its ship lift off and disappear into the sky. Around him, New Harmony continued its slow process of healing. The colony would never be the same as it was before the war. But it would survive. Humanity would survive. And the galaxy would have to learn to deal with a human species that was no longer asking for permission. Commander Nicole Perry entered the room a few minutes later, carrying a datapad full of reports. The Valari ambassador just confirmed they're joining the coalition. So did the Thriss and 4 other species. We're getting requests from a dozen more. Good, Jacob said. The more species that understand we're serious about mutual defense, the fewer wars we'll have to fight. Some people are calling us warmongers, Nicole said carefully. They're saying we overreacted, that we could have found a diplomatic solution if we'd tried harder. Jacob laughed, but there was no humor in it. Those people didn't watch New Portland burn. They didn't see the bodies of children who died because the council decided their lives weren't worth protecting. He shook his head. We tried diplomacy for 3 years. We begged and pleaded and followed every rule, and they let us burn. So no, we didn't overreact. We reacted exactly as much as we needed to in order to survive. Nicole looked out the window at the colony. Do you think we've changed? Do you think this war changed what humanity is? Yes, Jacob said honestly. We learned that the galaxy is more dangerous than we thought. We learned that peace requires strength, not just good intentions. We learned that sometimes you have to fight so hard that no one ever wants to fight you again. He turned to face her. But we also learned that we can take care of ourselves. We don't need the Council's permission to exist. We don't need anyone's approval to defend our people. That's a good lesson to learn, even if we had to learn it the hard way. Above them, Human warships patrolled the skies of New Harmony, silent guardians of a species that had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes you have to walk away from peace talks and embrace war so terrible that no one will ever make you fight again. Sometimes you have to show the galaxy your teeth before they'll respect your words. The age of humanity asking for permission was over. The age of humanity taking its rightful place among the stars had begun. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, the Zathrene fleet limped home to tell the story of what happened when they mistook human kindness for human weakness. The galaxy would never make that mistake again.